heard a lot about the benefits of gratitude for our mental health, our physical health, our social relationships, our cognitions, and indeed in my own work, I've looked at how gratitude benefits romantic partners. And so you may walk away today with this idea that, well, a thank you a day keeps the doctor away. Who needs apples? We have gratitude. And so before doing that, leaving with that idea that gratitude is good, period, I want to also take this same stance as Alex and suggest that there are times when gratitude might actually be the wrong prescription, and that we need to have a more nuanced view when we think about applying gratitude in our lives. So the research so far on gratitude has really focused on what we call main effects, this idea that are people who are more grateful better off? Do they have different outcomes than people who are less grateful naturally or in a control condition? And so this looks again at that average person. Is gratitude good on average? And we've also really focused on the benefits of gratitude, asking questions that look at how is gratitude good? So as Alex mentioned, we have to look at the whole picture. And I actually started my research on the fluffier, positive side of things. Unlike Wendy or Rudy, I then later on started to question, well, these things that are good, we also need to consider, is there a dark side? And so it's something that I've been thinking about for a while in my own research. And so, as I said, we need to consider that in certain situations or for certain people, gratitude might not have these benefits and indeed might even have negative consequences. So in my research on close relationships, I typically look at these normal samples of relatively happy couples. They have high scores on satisfaction. So what gratitude might mean in that context may be very different than what gratitude might mean in the context of an unhealthy or even abusive relationship. And so we have to think this through. So today I'm going to give you 5 examples of what I call the don'ts of practicing gratitude. And there isn't a lot of research directly on gratitude, so I'm pulling from the whole literature of social psychology. And I like to think of this as a jumping off point, a starting point for you to think about in your own lives, your own experiences, when we might need a more nuanced view of gratitude. So this is kind of a hodgepodge of ideas that I've thought about. The first is that we have to be careful that we don't overdose on gratitude. That more is better is not necessarily true. In fact, there's research that practicing gratitude too often might make you less happy than practicing it less often and maybe even less grateful. So in one study, they found that people who did a gratitude intervention 3 times a week didn't experience increases in well-being across 6 weeks. But people who only did it once a week did have increases in well-being. And this is just one study. We have to interpret it with caution, but it fits with a larger idea that we have in psychology. And so to give you an example of that, I think it's also important when we think about gratitude, in the same way doing it too often may not necessarily be better. When we do say a gratitude journal, having a long list might not be any more beneficial than a short list. So think about being confronted with 20 items you're asked to fill out and be grateful for. And this might be something you're supposed to do multiple times a week. And we know for the first 5 or 10 items, people are going strong. But as they start to have a hard time coming up with things they're grateful for, it might actually backfire. And so suddenly people say, well, if I can't complete this list, maybe I don't have that much I'm grateful for. And so instead of boosting gratitude, when we ask people to do it too often or too much, we might actually hurt ourselves and lead people to think that they're not as grateful as they should be. It's also just burdensome. So for certain individuals, they might love this, and other people might find it tiring to do a task too frequently, and that frustration and irritation is counterproductive. So the second don't is to don't let gratitude prevent you from recognizing your own effort and value. We know that gratitude helps us see how others play a role in our success, and this is important and good for our social connections, for having a better perspective on how we got where we are. Gratitude letters to people is one of the most powerful gratitude interventions. But attributing success entirely to other people, so being that gratitude to a fault, that extreme end, might actually prevent you from recognizing your own effort and hard work. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, that as much as we need to recognize the other people, we don't want to do it at the cost of also being able to see our own role in things and use that to motivate us in the future. So along the same line, more generally, we know that gratitude for others is good, being grateful for the people in your life. But gratitude, again, in the extreme. So think about someone who says to their partner, "I'm so lucky to have you, I don't deserve you." That might be actually masking insecurities. Rather than seeing the partner as valuable, perhaps that gratitude is really underlying a belief that that person is not valuable or not worthy. So just being aware that, again, gratitude for others is good, but not to the extent that we think it means we aren't valuable and worthy ourselves. So number 3 is don't apply it to the wrong person. So in my own work, I found that generally on average in healthy relationships, gratitude promotes commitment. People who are more grateful for their partners are more likely to want to maintain relationships with those partners and engage in behaviors to help them do so. But in an unhealthy relationship, I'm thinking close relationships, this might be actually someone, who abuses you, like Alex said, more generally in these extreme situations, might gratitude actually serve the same function? If someone focuses on the times when the partner is less abusive or brings flowers after a really big fight, focusing on those little moments might encourage them to stay in a relationship that really objectively is not healthy for them. And in that case, gratitude might have a negative consequence. So something to think about. The context is really key. So number 4 is don't use gratitude to avoid dealing with serious problems. We know from research that minor issues, so a roommate who generally is really good but occasionally leaves the dishes in the sink for you to clean up, having a focus on positivity in this situation can be beneficial. And this isn't particular to gratitude, but I think it applies. So choosing to think about, okay, they left the dishes in the sink, but in general this person is a really good roommate. I'm grateful for the ways in which they are good in my life. That can help you maintain perspective rather than get irritated or fixated on these little problems that are not really a big issue. But for severe problems, such as a roommate who doesn't respect your boundaries, sometimes I had to find a graphic for a bad roommate. Sometimes anger is needed in these cases to motivate change, and that's what research shows. And as someone pointed out earlier, gratitude and anger are negatively correlated with each other. So choosing in this case to focus on, well, yes, they didn't respect my boundaries in a big way, but hey, they don't leave the dishes in the sink. It might be reflecting an avoidance tactic or a situation where focusing on gratitude might prevent you from dealing with the bigger issue, and in that case, it's actually the negative behavior that you need. So people who, in these situations, show anger to their partner, they're more likely to get their partner to change that behavior, and they're more satisfied down the line. So finally, the 5th one is about don't let power dynamics get in the way, and Stalin would probably have something to say about this, apparently. And I wanted to bring this one in just to cue you in a little bit to this idea of the subtle dynamics of relationships that might influence how gratitude is experienced and expressed. So people who are higher in power, some research shows, that they see help from others as a way of incurring favor. So when a boss has an employee bring them coffee, rather than just being grateful, they might think, well, they probably wanted something from me. They're probably trying to get in good with the boss. They also found this to be true in couples where there's a big difference in earning and one partner earns a lot more, that when the other partner does stuff, they see it more as trying to incur favor and make what we call more cynical attributions for this favor that they did. And they're less likely to feel thankful. And so I think this suggests, again, that these dynamics, particularly power dynamics, might make gratitude have a different flavor to it. People might feel like they use gratitude to subvert people as well. And so thinking about how these dynamics might impact what it means when people express gratitude. So again, these are just 5 varied examples. I'm sure you can think in your own lives or your own experiences about other ways in which gratitude might have a more nuanced perspective. So it's not necessarily just gratitude is good, period. So what I hope you take away from this is that gratitude does have many benefits, but it's not a panacea. It's not the end-all, be-all in every situation. So until there's more research looking at these boundary conditions, my take on it is that we should err on the side of being grateful. There is mounting evidence that it is a powerful and potent factor that can help us have, but that we should also practice it mindfully and think about, in this context, in this relationship, is gratitude good? Before we go out and tell every couple, well, you should, try to be more grateful. Because some couples, some people, that might actually lead them down a path that we wouldn't want them to head down. So I would, of course, be remiss if I didn't express my own thanks to all of you, as well as the John Templeton Foundation and Greater Good, for having me here today and for funding my work. Thank you.